Okay, well, great to be here. Slightly delayed with problems on the metro, but here I am. So I'm David Kennedy, I'm the CEO of SBTI. Can I check how many people here actually know what the SBTI is? Great, okay. So my team was saying we're not sure if people will know what the SBTI is. Can we explain it? I will just say we were set up 10 years ago for companies, and 100 companies was our target, 100 companies to set their ambition. They wanted to act on climate change, they wanted to change their business, they wanted to contribute to climate objectives, and they didn't quite know at what level to set ambition and where to focus. And we have helped them with that, but we've gone well beyond the 100, I'll tell you that in a minute. We've become, I think, we were introduced as the gold standard is how the SBTI is now known for setting your climate ambition. Now, we've got a lot of negative stories at the moment around net zero, and I'll give you an anecdote. I was in Mumbai flying to Delhi a few weeks ago, seeing some of the big companies over there, so Mahindra and Tata and Bajaj and JSW and various others. And I was introduced on the plane to a big businessman, and when I said what I did, he said, "Oh, nobody's bothered about net zero since Trump, are they?" And I had to say to him, that's not quite correct. Not quite correct. It's not correct at all. And so what I want to do is share some actual evidence around what is happening, rather than those negative stories, which can be quite demoralizing if you really let them take hold of you. But the evidence is as follows. So we just reached a milestone of 10,000 companies have signed up with SBTI. So they've set targets with SBTI, 10,000. That is 40% of global market capitalization. It's 30% of the global greenhouse gas footprint. That hasn't slowed down at all since the change in administration in the United States. And so, for example, in 2024, it was just under 3,000 companies had targets validated by SBTI. Last year, 2025, it was over 3,000, so it's grown. The pace at which companies are joining us has increased at the same time as these negative stories. So companies are voting with their feet. Even in the US, so people say, have US companies left SBTI? And the answer is no, they haven't left SBTI. Do they continue to set targets with SBTI? Yes, they do. 400 US companies last year set targets with SBTI, 100 in December last year. So that continues right through the year. And we would expect about 3,000 companies, based on our pipeline, about 3,000 to set targets with us this year. So companies continue to act. You can see that. Where are these companies? So there's about 5,000 companies in the UK and Europe. There's about 4,000 in, forgotten what I'm saying now. It was an early start for me today. There's about 4,000 in Asia, predominantly Japan, China, and India. And then there's about 1,500 companies who work with us in the United States, about 400 in Latin America as well. So companies all around the world continue to act. Why do they act? It's not because they want to save the world, although many of these companies are values driven, but it has to have a very strong business case. And this business case is about managing transition risk, it's about strengthening business resilience, and it's about remaining competitive, in a changing world with an increasingly tight carbon constraint. So if you do nothing in that world, with carbon prices that are going up, either implicitly through regulations or explicitly through carbon prices in trading schemes or taxes, if you do nothing, your costs will go up. You will make the wrong investment choices, you'll invest in the wrong assets, you'll have to scrap them, you'll have to rapidly deploy new technologies as you get into the 2030s. That is going to be expensive. On the revenue side, increasingly, a lot of the companies that join us are because in their value chains, people will not buy from them further down the value chain. People will not buy for them if they haven't got science-based targets, if they are not acting. At the end of that value chain, so consumers, we know consumers, and particularly younger consumers, are value aligned in their purchasing behavior. That isn't really cutting through to a great extent now, but with better information, We would expect over time, as affordability concerns ease, I say as affordability concerns ease, it's looking pretty bad at the moment, isn't it? But that is a short-term thing. Over the next 5 and 10 years, we would expect that to cut through. And then attracting talent, I can see lots of young people here in the audience. Young people want to work for companies that align with their values. And again, to attract the best talent, you will have to be on that net zero path. So it just makes good business sense. It's managing transition risk, it's strengthening business resilience, and it is remaining competitive in that changing world. Now, setting science-based targets, that's the case for acting to transform your business, your operations, your supply chains. Why would you set science-based targets to do that? As I say, science-based targets is a way of calibrating your ambition, focusing in the right areas, having a common standard with your peers, with your supply chains, with your financial institutions, and there are clear benefits. So we did a survey just before Belém, the CARP in Brazil, and there were some strong themes that came out there. So companies that set science-based targets move more quickly to reduce emissions. They unlock cost savings through things like energy efficiency improvements and renewables. They get much more focus on long-term strategic thinking, which is what you need in this space. They get traction around their businesses, so it's not just a CSO thing. It becomes a strategy, an operations, a procurement game that brings everybody together as it has to do. And it improves your reputation with customers and financial institutions. So many benefits to set science-based targets and then to act, to implement, to start to change your business. And you don't need to change your business overnight. This is a 10 and a 20-year game, but the extent of business transformation, you need to start now, otherwise you will fall behind and leave yourself too much to do. Now, what are we doing at SBTI? What I've heard in my first year, and I've been around about 1 year now as CEO of SBTI, what I've heard is we really need SBTI. We've got to have that common standard, that gold standard. What I also hear is people say, you've got to change. And we are changing. We've just agreed in the last week or so a new strategy with my board, and we will publish that at the end of April. And that is not business as usual for SBTI. It is a step change. And it's a step change in a number of respects, but I'm going to focus in on a couple now because time is short. So the first thing is our approach to standards, and many of you will have seen Corporate Net Zero Standard version 2, which is our flagship. Many of you will have commented, we've engaged widely. We've had 1,000 responses to each of 2 consultations. We've had 100 plus people in expert working groups. We've had 50 companies piloting. We will be publishing, and people are saying, when are you going to publish this Corporate Net Zero Standard? We're going to publish it at the end of June, so we're nearly there. It's with our technical council now for approval. Key changes in that. So one, we are going to have targets which reflect the things that companies can influence and not the things that they can't influence. And that includes an increased focus on dependencies, which we haven't talked about before, but anyone who's done transition planning will know that the dependencies are absolutely key. Second thing is how we define targets. So targets are not set in stone, not binary, and if you miss them, you've failed. The transition is difficult. It's highly uncertain. As I say, it's subject to big dependencies, whether that's technology, supply chain, finance, policy. So targets are set on a best efforts basis. Great if you can meet them, but if you can work towards them, if you can highlight barriers, if you can address those barriers, many of them are beyond the company level, and we will facilitate action beyond the company level with peers and with governments, then you can continue working with SBTI. The third thing is, how do you meet those targets? So we've always said it's okay to have renewable electricity certificates, for example, to meet Scope 2 targets, but there is a much wider range of environmental attribute certificates. So biomethane, green steel, green cement, to name a few. Those approaches that you really have to use in certain sectors. So flag, for example, you need mass balance approaches. You need book and claim for those landscape level interventions. They will all be allowed within the new approach. And then we've got a really good balanced position now on high integrity carbon credits, which are a complement, not a substitute to reducing your own carbon footprint, but very much part of our framework. We will recognize the value in that for companies who want to invest in ongoing emissions responsibility, we call it. So that is important given that we need removals in particular to be anywhere near our climate objectives globally. Second thing is we are going to focus much more on implementation. What's actually happening? I think it's a gap in our framework at the moment that you set your target and then we see you in 5 years. We're going to have a continuous relationship with companies. We're not going to mark your homework. That isn't our job. Nobody wants us to police what is happening at the individual company level, but we will offer benchmarking services with peers that will be private, that will be anonymized, and we will also offer system-level assessments of what is going well, where are the barriers, and what can be done to address them. And then we will work with partners to make sure the barriers are addressed. We will expand in Asia. That is a big growth market. We will expand in some of the high emitting sectors, so steel we haven't done enough in, aviation, shipping, aluminium to name a few. We've done quite a lot actually in forestry, land use, agriculture. We've done a lot in cement. We've done a lot in chemicals. We've done a lot in the power sector, but we will grow in those sectors and the ones where we are less well represented at the moment. We will grow as well through supply chains, so we are just at the moment piloting an approach where we work with companies to engage their supply chains and get their suppliers to set science-based targets, and we support them through that journey. And then the last thing is, many of you will have experienced, it's a pretty fragmented ecosystem of organizations that are supporting the corporate net zero transition, from the accounting aspects to the different standards to the assessment of progress to reporting. Now that all has to be joined up, otherwise you are duplicating, you are having to do things to meet one standard and a different standard. That is unnecessary burden, and we see ourselves as coordinating, playing a leading role, making sure that the system is joined up, and making sure that it speaks with one voice. We've got that negative narrative. We haven't got, at the moment, a compelling positive narrative, but we see ourselves working with companies and partners as developing that compelling business resilience narrative, and then telling that story so it starts to resonate and to grow, that it's amplified through the system. I should say as well, people ask me, am I worried about the ISO net zero standard? My answer is no, I'm not worried. I see it as a good thing. There's many tens of thousands of companies out there. It is a great on-ramp, the ISO net zero standard for SBTI. We are working closely with ISO in partnership. So that's an example of how we are joining up. I'm going to leave it there. So I've used my 15 minutes up. I will summarize and say, 1 year in, it's a wonderful organization to lead. SBTI at the heart of corporate climate action. I'm so glad I made the move because it brings together all the things I've done previously. Corporate climate action continues. There's a different communications approach, but companies get the argument. There is a strong business case. You should be acting, and if you don't act, your business is not resilient. You're going to fall behind in future. You're setting yourself up to fail. So strong case for action, strong case for setting science-based targets. We are changing. Those targets will be better aligned with the levers you have. They will be pragmatic while remaining science-based. We'll focus more on implementation. We will grow to have even more representation than the 10,000 companies we currently work with. We will work with partners, we'll work with you, and together we can drive the corporate net zero transition. We can make that happen. We've got a great foundation to build on. We can make it happen, and we can do what is good for business and good for the climate. So I will leave it there. Have a great conference here, and I will look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.